Welcome back to Maintainer's Garage. I'm Bags, and I'm in Stay Puft Marshmallow mode because it's a little cool outside. I normally wear this for like grease jobs and whatnot, but I also wear it for a little extra warmth. It's a little cold here in Atlanta. So what I'm going to be doing today is the rear brakes, pads, and rotors. I shot a video a couple days ago where I just did the pads. Well, in doing so, luckily for me, I looked at the back side of the rotor after I had the wheels off, and I realized it had a gouge in it. So kind of just stopped, reassembled the truck, ordered some rotors. So the reason I'm telling you this is, hey, it's okay to make an error. The worst mistake I would have made would have been say, oh man, I didn't order the rotors, let me put the brake pads on there and just keep going. I'm just telling this to y'all, say, hey, somebody who thinks they know what they're doing obviously doesn't. But, I looked on the front side of the rotor through the wheel, I touched it with my fingernail, I didn't feel any gouges. Well, when I took the wheels off, I made sure I checked the back side of the rotor too, and that's when I felt the gouge. And it was like, okay. And again, that was my fault, my mistake, but I didn't make the mistake worse. I didn't make my problems worse. I didn't create more problems for me in the future. I just said, all right, done, stop. All right, now what? Order rotors, reassemble the car. When the rotors get in, disassemble everything again and redo it. Yeah, I know it's more work, and that's just the way you got to do it. So anyway, we're going to be doing the rear brake pads, which are already, the newer ones are already on there, but we're going to take them off, which is the same thing, and then taking the rotors off, putting the new rotors on, and putting the new brake pads back on. So let's get into that. I've got a couple things I want to show you before I do that, though. A couple tips about wheel chocks and garage doors. So we started by pulling the car in garage. I backed in to make it easier so I can be inside and put the car in park. Whether you put the emergency brake on or not is irrelevant because you're going to lift the rear wheels. Chock the front wheels. I've got some nice heavy duty chocks I got from my favorite hardware store, part store, whatever you want to call it. And I've got one under each front wheel. So that way when I know I'll lift the rear end of the vehicle's not going to roll forward. So what you see there is a 2x4 in front of my garage door sensor. Why is that? It's because the way I've got my SUV parked, I'm not in the way of the sensor. So for example, if my wife were to come home and come down the street and press the garage door opener button before she could see, the garage door would come down and hit my vehicle. So I've got a little 2x4 blocking that sensor. So that way the garage door won't move, nothing bad can happen. Again, just mitigating problems for myself. Those of you with impact guns, this won't apply to, but if you don't have an impact gun, what you want to do is pop this little center cap off before you get the car in the air. And then just break the lug nuts loose, because once you get the vehicle up in the air, rear wheel will spin, and you won't be able to break the torque on these lug nuts with it in the air. So you just want to break them loose on the ground, that way you can remove them when you get it in the air. And obviously, this is the driver's side, passenger side same. So that is the rear differential of the vehicle, and it has the axles in it, and that's where you want to lift it from. It's commonly referred to as the pumpkin. This thing is strong enough to carry the entire weight of the vehicle, plus whatever you're towing, so it is strong enough to lift the vehicle. I'll get the jack under there and show you that. So I've got the jack seated on the pumpkin. On the passenger side of the vehicle, there's a little thing that sticks out on the side of the pumpkin. Make sure not to lift up on that. Just go to the left of that, to the driver's side of that, and you'll be perfect. So, I've got two jack stands under the car. They're being supported by, the weight of the vehicle is being supported by those two jack stands. I'm going to take my jack and just raise it just a little bit, just put a hair of tension on it. That way, if the jack stands fail, it won't actually fall onto the jack itself. It'll just already be resting. So And each one of my jack stands, they're rated at 3 tons per pair. So that means those two can hold 6,000 pounds. My vehicle weighs less than 6,000 pounds, well, let's call it 6,000. So let's say 50% of it's in the back. Even if it's a little more, if it's 4,000 pounds on those two jack stands, I'm still 2,000 pounds under their 6,000 pound rating. That's important to know and important to never forget. Your jack stands are rated in pairs unless otherwise stated, so those are 3 ton capacity for the two. So they're easily at 6,000 pounds, will carry this at extreme most 4,000 pound load while I'll take the tires off. So now the car is totally safe for me, and I'm not even getting under the car, but I'm going to be under one of the wheels and under the wheel well. So again, it's my life, it matters, I don't want to die up under here. Okay, so vehicles in the air, jack stands are under it, jack's under it for extra safety. And again, we just broke these loose, so you just gotta take them the rest of the way off. And if I can't turn it by hand, breaker bar should be very little torque on each one of them. So they should just come right off. And again, if you have an impact wrench, you could have just ugga-dugga these right off. As the tire, as you get down to the last couple lug nuts, you want to support the tire, because the tire may literally want to just slide right off the axle. So you just kind of put your knees right on the tire and hold. And that gives you your hands to do this. And the last one comes off. And then you can just put your hand on the wheel, grab, pull, off. And that exposes rotor, caliper hat, brake pads, everything that we need to start taking stuff off of so we can get this off. And obviously, again, driver's side, passenger side, same. All right, I had the camera obviously set up in the wrong position, so I moved it to make sure I could hopefully get a good shot of this. Right here are two 8mm bolts that hold this little cover on, and it covers the bolts for the brake caliper. So you just take those off, and it's just, again, 2 little simple fasteners, and they're 8mm, so they're small. So when you get them off, take this little shield, put it under the car just a little bit to where you have to kind of reach for it with the fasteners. That way you can't frickin' kick them into the frickin' yard under something. Save yourself from yourself. It's 2 14mm bolts right on the caliper. This ratchet is outstanding. It's adjustable and the head swivels. Number one reason it's adjustable: leverage. This makes, bolts that may not want to come off because they've been on there for 20 years. Okay, but I just put these back on the other day, so I knew they were going to come off fairly easy, but I still use this just out of habit. And again, you can put these right over there. And when these 2 bolts get off, you'll be able to pull the caliper hat right off and expose the brake pads. Come on, there we go. With this, you just want to, it'll fit perfectly right on top of the axle. It's safe, not going anywhere. And then you just pull the pads out, and now you just have this caliper mount. It's 2 17mm screws, and they're just right on the back side here. Oh, you got to be careful. One of these just fell out. I'll show you where to put that at, no problem. All right. And I did not take these out, so as you see, I just extended that, and that gave me much more leverage to loosen those up. And again, there's two 17mm bolts. And while I'm thinking about it, as you noticed, I've changed gloves. Why did I change gloves? Well, brake pads are nasty and there's brake dust everywhere. So I don't want to get my other gloves just totally filthy yet and have to throw them in the trash. So this little metal retaining clip goes right there, and it helps hold the pad in. And again, we can just set that right there and not kick it. Well, if you kick that thing, you're going to hurt your toe. So you ain't got to worry about kicking something into oblivion there. Now, one thing, this little rubber bushing here, plug, is there. So, and luckily, I did this the other day when I took all this apart just to change my pads. You can look inside this hole and see the parking brake. Why is that important? So that way, if you happen to make a mistake and you realize, hey, I need rotors and I need rotors, you can pull this little plug out, look in there, and see if your parking brake shoes pads are intact or if they're worn and need to be replaced. Mine have plenty of meat on them. My parking brake works okay, so I knew that, but I just was looking anyway. Wanted to show you about it. And you'll need to transfer this little rubber plug to the new rotor. So again, set it over there. Can't kick it off into the never to be seen again world. And sometimes because of the parking brake being a drum setup, you may have to rotate this a little bit to get it off. Come on. Oh, and that's why you don't set the parking brake either. Again, the rear wheels are off the ground. You're not going to help yourself with the parking brake ain't going to help you at all. But you don't want to have a problem of getting this off. And you just got to wiggle it. And what you don't want to do is have too much force on one side. You want to try to pull it off straight as possible. And that'll expose the parking brake. And drum brakes and all, their awesomeness. I mean, they're simple and easy, but they're a son of a diddly to replace. And yeah, I stole that from AVE, sorry. So, that's that. All right, let me get this cleaned up a little bit and we'll show you that. All right, so obviously got our new rotor here. Got some just brake cleaner, and you just want to go over this whole thing. I mean, again, this is brake cleaner. This brakes, so it's okay to hit everything in here. And what this is doing is just breaking down all that parking brake dust and cleaning it up for you. That way, you know, you can have a clean mounting surface to go to. Or clean, not mounting surface, I apologize. Clean brake shoes for your new, brand new rotor. And had I been a little smarter, I'd have put a rag or something under here beforehand. But I'm not a smart man. So now's the time, since you just cleaned everything off and it's all dried, to look at everything, inspect it. Look at these springs, make sure they look okay. There's a tension spring here, a tension spring there, make sure they look okay. And just in general, look for any kind of trash that might be down in here. And I don't see any. So that's good. And like I said, when I looked through that little inspection hole the other day, I knew my parking brake pads had plenty of life left in them. Okay, so before we put the rotor back on, you want to put the plug back in. And then again, you don't want to try to, you know, angle it on. You want to try to put it on as straight as possible. And we're fully seated. So now we come back to our bracket and our two 17mm bolts. And that thing Let's see if I've bent this thing to where it's not locking in place correctly. So it's got these two little tabs, two little clips right here, one on that end and that end. I'm just going to take a pair of needle nose and gently, no Conan, no She-Ra, gently, softly, just squeeze these a little bit to get them a little closer to see if I can get a better clamp. Third time's a charm. Alright, so again, you got your two 17mm bolts. And it just lines right up back here. And just start one, and upper or lower, doesn't matter where you start, and line up the other one. Tighten. And these bolts get 76 foot-pounds of torque. If you don't have a torque wrench, snug is fine. You can't always have every tool you need. And if your budget doesn't allow you to have this, although you can get one from Harbor Freight for $10 on sale, but I understand. If you don't have one, snug. Take your ratchet. Again, not gorilla, torque 76 foot-pounds is less than lug nuts. Think about that. That's snug. I am getting embarrassed by this freaking clip is what I'm getting. I am not gorillaing this. I am not grunting. I pushed, it snugged, it stopped, I'm done. And let me set this up and I'll have a good comparison. Make sure I'm on 75, 76. So you saw snug and then a little more, obviously. Just a tiny bit more. Let's see if I can do a better job on the bottom one. So that's snug. That's a little tight. Like it was snug and I again gave a little more effort. There we are. I was a little light what I thought, but I've got the benefit of a torque wrench. If you don't bring out your full He-Man or She-Ra. Just give it a little one grunt. How about that? Instead of two grunts, one grunt, you're done. I'm trying to make this easy. I'm trying to make it simple, and I'm trying to entertain. Hopefully, I'm doing at least one of those. Don't forget to set your torque wrench to 0 when you're done. So on the grease, I've already got some between the backing plate and the pad. Well, I'm not sure you can see that. I already took these backing plates off and put grease on them. I did that the other day. If you're changing pads, take your Avis hand, pull the backing plate off, put on the new pad, put a little bit of grease there. Now on the backing plate, put a little grease. This is brake grease, high temperature brake grease, not axle grease, not nothing, brake grease. So this tube is like $3 at whatever spot you buy parts from, or anything, supplies, what have you. The bane of my existence, this firkin thing. There we go. And again, and you can do this. Anybody can do this. I'm clearly not intelligent, and I clearly don't know what I'm doing. So, if I can do it, you can do it. I know. I know. That's just what you're going to get. If you're here, I'm letting you know. That's just what you're going to have. Then, on the piston here, put a little bit, and you can put a little bit there. And again, just be careful of this hose. You know, don't treat it like it owes you money. Treat it like your grandmother's china. If your grandma don't have china, treat it like your grandmother's sofa with the plastic on it. Yeah, that good. Am I going to need to compress this? Yep. Because I put a brand new rotor on. It's thicker than the old rotor. So now I got to compress this. I've got to get a C-clamp and my 2x4 and compress that in, and I'll show you that. So I've got my big 6-inch C-clamp. I've got my caliper, my little block of wood, and my hose is making this difficult. Yeah, I'm just going to let that one go. Sometimes it's just too easy. And what you want to do is just have this be a little wider than what you need. Oh, and a tip. Just a tip. Just for a second. Just to see how it feels. Couldn't let that one go. If you happen to have the other side disconnected, and what I mean by disconnected is just like this, the piston's laying out. Do not compress this piston with the other piston free. So it's not on the hat, it's not on the rotors, not on brake pads, nothing. So that piston could push all the way out as you compress this one. I just went over there and put a block of 2x4 inside the caliper just like that. So when I start compressing this one, that caliper is going to come out, it's going to move out and run into that. So I'm not going to blow the piston out of the caliper. Don't ask me how I learned that, because I'm going to tell you. I learned that years ago doing it that way, and I heard something pop and I walked over there and my freaking piston is just laying on the ground, brake fluid's pouring out, and I'm like, you big dummy. So, how do you gain knowledge and wisdom? Mistakes. And you just want to I'll show you when I get the caliper mounted where I put this at. You just want to rotate it, and if it feels like you're having to turn this with the force of, trying to kill somebody, stop. All right, now we're bottomed out. So obviously I had the clamp on that. The front side, the back side I had right back here. And we bottomed the piston out. And before I forget, slap some lube on that piston again. And again, a dab will do you. A dab, rub it around, you're fine. Those have lube on them, so. And it might get hung up on these little mounting bolts here. Just push those in. And you can get your 14mm mount bolts and get whichever one started. Grab the other one. Start it. Come on. You dirty. There you go. And this torque is 20 foot-pounds. This is, I go a little more than 20. I go snug. And sometimes these mounts spin. If they start spinning, mine did not, get a wrench, pliers, hold them, spin, you'll be fine. See if the bottom one spins. Nope. And again, I'm going over the 20 foot-pounds, but I'm not trying to do the 76 that was on there. Snug works. Now, don't forget to put your plug in. Brand new rotors on there. I've got a lot of dust and dirt and grease on here. I'm not going to spray where I just put that grease, but I am going to spray the other side of the rotor. And give it a little rotation. See where all my nasty paw prints were. And if that brake cleaner gets on the front of that pad, ain't gonna hurt a thing. Now we just got to put the wheel back on and we're good. No, I'm sorry. I made a huge mistake. We got to put our hat back on and our 8mm screws. Man, I was just chugging along there in my mind, but again, I had it right there in my view. I looked right at it, bam. So, you just, sometimes you go a little too fast, and I'm not even in that big of a rush. I was just like, oh, okay, we're jamming up and going, and yeah. But again, nothing wrong with realizing what you've done and just, hey, it's okay, no worries. These have no torque on them, so snug is fine. These are freaking 8mm fasteners. You could easily wrench these off. I mean, they're probably hardened, they're probably number 8s, but snug is all you need there. And we've changed our rotor. We already put new pads on the other day, but basically it's the same process minus removing this. So we're good to go. We know we tightened down the two 14mm bolts that hold the caliper to the caliper mounting bracket. We tightened the two 17mm bolts on the caliper mounting bracket. 76 foot-pounds or 1 grunt. That's a new measurement. You're welcome. We put our little hat back on with 8mm bolts. Less than 1 grunt, just snug, and we're done. Cleaned everything up. We're ready to put our wheel back on. So we're ready for the wheel to go back on. A lot of people have problems with this, with the weight and whatnot. Do it whatever way works for you. You can, try to manhandle it like that. I've personally found I grab the bottom and then back here, and then you just got to line it up with one of the lug nuts and then rotate. And come on we are. And you always want to hand start these. This thing ain't. That's right. Always want to hand start your lug nuts if you have an Ugga Dugga gun impact a good bit before you grab that thing. You don't want to jack the threads up. You don't want to create another problem for yourself. And as you saw, I started every one of these. When you put them on and tighten them down in the star pattern. And after I get this down, I'll come back with my torque wrench and show you that. Alright, so your torque is 97 foot-pounds. And again, and you saw, I mean, that didn't just, I had to rotate that around. You want to install a star pattern. So again, I wasn't relying on my impact gun. I'm relying on this. I just want to seat them. That way I can get this down. And I always go over them again just to make sure everything is snug. Again, lug nuts are important. Forget them one time, you'll remember. Again, that's how you learn. That's how you gain wisdom. That's how you gain knowledge. You keep making mistakes. And you just put this back on, and one good. 3 good smacks and you're in there. You're not done. Go test drive your vehicle. Your rear brakes only do about, depending on your vehicle, 20 to 30% of your braking. So as you're rolling out of your driveway, tap your brakes as you're going down. Your front brakes are going to work, but what you want to do is build up the pressure on that piston so they can clamp down on the rear pads. Drive around your neighborhood. Make sure your vehicle stops. Again, your front brakes are way more important to do this than your rears, but you want all your braking force. So drive around subdivision, some 25-mile-an-hour stops, then go on to a main road and do some 35, 45-mile-an-hour stops. All right, well, we're all done. We just got to take the chocks out of the front. Don't forget about the 2x4 blocking the garage sensor, and we're in there. So thanks for watching Maintainers Garage. Have a great day.